We can transform our Ionic application into a progressive web app using the Angular CLI. For that, let's open our terminal in the root of our project and type ng add Angular PWA. Here's what that CLI schematic did for us. First, it created all of our icons in different variations. This is for when the application needs the different resolution icons depending on where it's going to be loaded. Then it created our web manifest file. In this file, we have all of the configuration for our PWA. Here you can see that we are linking to the icons and we are saying, okay, whenever we need the size 72 by 72 pixels, then this is the icon we are going to use. Also, it's adding other properties. Name is the name of your application. Short name is the short name that's going to be behind the icon. The theme color, I've seen it used differently depending on the platform. In Android, some of the times is the one that goes in the background when you're using the task switcher. This is a placeholder background color for waiting while your styles load. It's also the background color of your splash screen. The display property let us set the display of our PWA. It can take multiple values. For example, full screen means it's going to take the entire screen for the device. Standalone is similar to full screen, but it's going to show the device status bar. Minimal UI is similar to standalone, but it lets the browser choose if they show the navigation bar or not. And browser, it's basically a mobile browser. It will show the URL bar, the navigation controls, and so on. The scope variable is the scope we want to give to the PWA. It's usually just the /, but if, for example, you have your application, but the PWA, you want the manifest only to affect a part of the application, like if you have the yourdomain.com/app, then this manifest will only affect everything that's in the app folder. And the start URL is the URL you want to load when the application is entered through the icon installed on the screen. For the service worker, the CLI already did 3 things for us. First, it installed the package for the Angular service worker. Then, it went into our app module and initialized the service worker for us. It says it's only going to be used in a production environment. And also, it created a service worker configuration file. Here is where we have the configuration for our service worker. We can see that it created some asset groups. Here we're going to handle the assets of our applications and give them cache policies. For example, it created 2 assets group. In the first one, we see that it's given the name of app. And this is a prefetch. This is going to load all of the essentials for an application to work. So, all of the JavaScript, all of the CSS files, and the index manifest and the favicon. When we set install mode to prefetch, what we are telling it is, you are going to load and you're going to get all of these files as soon as the user navigates to your application. And below you can see that it created another configuration. This is called assets. And this is basically for all of the images, fonts, and other static files we have in our domain. And here we set the install mode to lazy. This means that it won't cache these files until you navigate to pages that loads them. But the update mode is set to prefetch, meaning that if in our hosting environment some of these file changes, it's going to download them immediately. Now that we configured our application to work as a PWA, there are 2 best practices we need to talk about. First, it's how we handle updates. For that, we are going to go ahead and open the app component. And in here, we are going to import the SW update from the Angular Service Worker package. We are also going to inject it into the constructor. And in here, we're going to create a conditional, and we're going to check if the SW update is available. Then we are going to run some code. And what we are going to do is that we are going to subscribe to that is available. And whenever there is an available lesson, we're going to trigger a pop-up to ask our users, a new version is available, do you want to load it? And then we're going to reload the page. This is mostly so that when we find an updated version in our service worker, we can have our user reload the page so that they can get the latest version of our application. The second best practice is that we can give context to our user when we want them to install our application. If you let the service worker or the browser decide when they'll ask the user to install your application, like to add them to the home screen, they might do that while the user is busy doing something else. So the user might just discard that and then they won't get the chance to install your application. But if you want to give the user more context, you can create a functionality where you specifically ask the user to click on a button or something else, and then that way they can install the application. For that, we are going to create a new function below our constructor, and we are going to call it getInstallPrompt. In here, we are going to add an event listener to the window object. This event listener is going to listen for the before install prompt event, and then it's going to get this event. The first thing we want to do here is to prevent the default. So we are going to prevent this event for asking the user, do you want to add our application to the home screen? Once we stop the event for asking our users, we are going to create a class variable called installPrompt, and then in here we're going to say, okay, this .installPrompt is going to be equal to whatever event we got here. And then we can create a new function, and we can call that function ask user to install app. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to call this .installPrompt.prompt. And this here will trigger the event that will ask the user if they want to install the application in their home screen. To prepare our application to receive push notifications, first we are going to go into our files and we are going to look for the manifest file. You can see that the manifest file is inside the source folder. So at the same level, you're going to create a new file, and that file is going to be called Firebase Messaging SW. SW stands for Service Worker. Before we move forward, we're going to go to the Angular.json file. Inside of the assets, you're going to find where it's declared in the manifest file, and right below that, you're also going to add the new messaging service worker. This is going to make sure that when the CLI is building your application, it picks up these two files right here. Once that's done, let's go back to our messaging service worker. In here, we're going to import two packages. As you can see, we have the core of the Firebase SDK, and we also are going to import the Firebase Messaging SDK. Then we are going to initialize our application. For that, we use firebase.initializeApp and we pass our credentials. If you don't know where your credentials are, you can navigate to console.firebase.google.com. You go into your application, and in here you go into the settings, project settings, and you're going to find the credentials for your application here. So let's copy this object, and now you can use it here in your service worker. Next, we are going to create an instance of the messaging package. And then we are going to go to our web manifest file, and we are going to add a new property. This property is going to be called GCM sender ID. And this number is going to be unique for every single application out there, because this isn't really your sender ID. This is a Google Cloud Messaging's sender ID. So it's the same for every one of us. Then we go back to our service worker, and right after our initialization of messaging, we are going to create a background handler. This is going to listen to the push notifications in the background, and here it's not doing anything. It's just logging to the console whatever it gets on the payload. In this background handler, we are going to customize our notification for a bit. So here we're going to create a variable called notification title, and we are going to get the value from payload.notification.title. Then we are going to create a new object called notification options, and it's going to have a body, that's the body that comes in the notification payload, and an icon. This icon is pointing out to our own assets file to the 72 by 72 pixels version of our icon. And then we are going to return inside of this handler a new show notification, and it's going to show the notification title and the notification options. We could technically skip that part, but we want to customize it a bit because inside of the payload we had the title and the body, but we didn't have the icon. So we are adding the icon here before showing the push notification to the user. After that's done, we're going to create a new service. So for that, let's go ahead and open our terminal and we can type Ionic generate service and we're going to create a service called push notification. So let's open our push notification service and here we are going to import Angular Fire messaging and we're going to import the Firebase messaging namespace. For this to work, we also have to go to our app module and where we are declaring Angular Fire, we are also going to say, okay, I'm not only using Firestore or storage, but I'm also going to be using Angular Fire messaging and it's come from the messaging package. And then you also get to register it in the imports. Then we can save and close this file and go back to our push notification service. Here we are going to create a class variable to store our push notification token and we are going to inject the Angular Fire messaging service to our constructor. Then we are going to create a new function called request permission. And in this function, we are going to use Angular Fire messaging to request the user's token. This is an observable, so we can actually subscribe to this token. So here we get back the token and we can create an arrow function when we can say that our push notification token is equal to that token we got there. And we also can create a function to handle the error when we can just say, okay, let's log to the console that something bad happened. Then we're going to create a second function called receive message. And here we're going to call messaging.messages and it's also an observable that we can subscribe to. Inside of the subscription, you are going to get the payload for the message that's incoming. And in here you can do whatever you want with that message. Right now we are just going to log it to the console. But if, for example, you are sending a link inside of your push notification and you want to navigate the user to that link, you can do something like window.location and you can assign the link that's coming inside of the push notification. You could also inject the Angular router into the service and handle that with the Angular router itself. Now that that's done, we can go and close these files and go back to our app component. In here, we want to import the service that we just created, and we also want to later inject it into our constructor. Then in our constructor, we are going to call the two functions that we created inside of the push notification service. One will request the permission to access push notifications, and the other one will handle all the incoming messages. To deploy our application, first let's go to our Firebase console and let's look for hosting. You can click here and you're going to be taken to the Firebase hosting page. There you're going to click on the Get Started button. Let's just go through this, click Next. Next, they are explaining what you're going to do, but we'll see that in the video. And click Continue to Console. Now Firebase hosting is ready for you to use and they are waiting for your first release. So then we can go back into our application and open the terminal. And in here, you're going to type Firebase init hosting. It's going to ask you a few things, like first, are you going to use an existing project or create a new Firebase project? Since we already have our Firebase application, we're going to say use an existing project. The only one I have here is this one. That's the one I've been showing you as an example. So I'm going to click enter. And then it asks you about your build. It says, what do you want to use as your public directory? Here, we're going to type www because that's the default Angular is giving us. If you are not sure, you can go into the angular.json file and inside of the build, you can see the output path. This one is www, so that's what I'm going to add there. Here I can click enter. Configure as a single page application. This will rewrite all URLs to index.html. We're going to say yes because Ionic Angular creates a single page application. Set up automatic builds and deploys with GitHub, not at this time. And it says, okay, you already have an index.html file. Do you want to override it? Let's say no. And Firebase initialization completed. So let's see what it created. When you go to the File Explorer, you're going to see that it added a .firebase.rc file. And in here, it's only telling you, okay, this is the project that you are using. And then it added a firebase.json file, and this has only the hosting configuration because we are only deploying through Firebase hosting. It says, okay, the public directory is going to be the www folder. We are going to ignore the firebase.json file, and we are going to ignore the node modules, and everything is going to be routed through the index.html file. If you don't know why this is happening, you can open your index.html file, and you can see that everything that's coming through that file is going to get this app root. That app root is going to load the app component, and that app component has the Angular router. So everything will be handled through there. Once all of that is configured, we are going to open the terminal again. Once we have that set up, we are going to create a production build to deploy. For that, I'm going to use the Angular CLI, typing ng build --prod. Okay, I had an issue during the build. So I noticed that here I actually went back to the app.module.file and noticed that in here where I'm importing Angular Fire messaging, I should actually be importing the Angular Fire messaging module. And then go below in the imports array and you need to do the same. Then you can save. You can close that file. And then you can run the ng-build prod command again. Now that our build is ready, we can go back to the console, and in here we can use the Firebase CLI to deploy our application. You can say Firebase deploy, and this would deploy your entire application. But if you have other things here, like let's say Firebase security rules, cloud functions, and things like that, and you only want to deploy hosting, you can pass the only flag and type hosting. This way, the only thing that will be deployed is your Firebase hosting. Once that's done, you can go back here to your hosting console. Once you reload, you see that it no longer says waiting for a deploy, but says that the status is the current deploy, and that's today's date, and the user that did the deploy, and it says it has, let's see, 1,000 over 400 files. In here, you can add a custom domain to your application, or you can quickly test this with any of the domains we have. So for example, we click the first one, my first app.web.app, and you see that it's taking me to the application. And the first thing it's doing is asking me if I want to allow push notifications. And there we have our entire application as a PWA. Let's see, we can do inspect. Let's open this here a little bit more. And in Lighthouse, we can see, okay, let's generate a new report to see how our application is doing. And as you can see, it finished, and it says that the application goes in over 93 for performance, it has accessibility, best practice, and we are lacking a little bit in SEO. We'll tackle that later. And it says that indeed this is a progressive web application. If we click here, we can see all of the tests that passed. It says, okay, it has a manifest and a service worker. Then it goes and says, okay, it has the start URL, it redirects to HTTPS, and it says that it does not provide a valid Apple Touch icon. So that's something that we can fix, and we can add that icon to the index file. Since we want to improve our SEO performance, let's go over some technical SEO things that we can implement. I feel like I need to do a disclaimer here. Like, this isn't a guide on how to be number one in Google. This is more of a technical guide. So things that the application actually needs to be able to be crawled by search engines like Google, DuckDuckGo, or Bing, or something like that. For that, I'm serving the application, and I'm going to go back to localhost 4200. There are a few things we need. First, we can go open our File Explorer, and in here in the source folder, we are going to add a new file. This file is going to be called Robots.txt. This file is going to serve as instructions for web crawlers and for search engines. And it's going to tell them, okay, from this domain, you can crawl these URLs or you can crawl this content. If you have a public website and it doesn't require login and everything you want, and you want everything to be indexed by Google, you can do user agent and do the star for everything and disallow and you leave it blank. This way is going to tell that it's not going to block anything to any web browser. If, for example, you had, I don't know, like an admin domain where you have some things that you don't want to be indexed, here you can do -admin. And then basically it would tell all of the web crawlers that they need to stop from crawling this admin folder. Everything else is fair game. Then let's save it. And now we need to open the angular.json file. And we need to tell it, okay, we need to add a new file to our assets. It's going to be the robot.txt. In here, we are going to add it right below the Firebase.messaging service worker. And here, depending on your Angular versions, you can do something like a relative import. So src/something will work. But if it starts giving you issues saying that it needs the root folder, then you need to add the entire root to your application. So here, let's just do this and replace this with the robots.txt file. Then we can save that and we can close those files. Another thing we can also do is that we can search for the images we are using in our application. We usually get penalized by SEO if our images don't have an alt text. This helps web crawlers know what the image is about, but more importantly, it helps screen readers identify what the image is. So if you have users that have some kind of visual disability, then this will help them because the screen reader is going to be able to describe what they are saying that this image has. So here, since this is the poster for the movie, we can actually say something like poster for, and then add the movie title. That way, it will change like poster for The Matrix, poster for Shawshank Redemption, and things like that, depending on the movie. And one other thing we can do is that we can add meta tags. So what are meta tags? We have two meta tags in our application, and these are the title and the description. The title is going to be shown in our browser tab. So here you see it says Ionic app. I wanted to say something more relevant to my application. And whenever you Google something, let's see, for example, JS mobile dev, the title is also being to be referenced here, and the meta description is what you see here in Google. So we want to have something relevant that our user is going to understand what it is, and it's going to say, okay, this works for me, so they click and go to our page. We can add the title here on our page. So let's go to the import, and we're going to import the title service from angular.platform browser. Then we are going to go down to our constructor and inject it here. And then we are going to call it from inside the constructor, and we are going to pass a more relevant title. This can be our movie list. When we save and reload the page, you can see that in the tab, it changed from Ionic app to movie list. The platform browser also provides another package called Meta. We can import it from here, and we can also add it to our constructor. Then we are going to go down inside the constructor, and we are going to call the meta tag service, and we are going to say update tag. The tag that we want to update is the description tag, and the content we want to give it is something like this is the description of my website. Then we are going to click save. We are going to go back to the browser. We're going to click inspect, and you are going to notice that, let's see, in here, we're going to close the body. In the head tag, you see here we have the title, it's movie list, and we start scrolling down, you are going to find the meta description tag, and the content is going to be, this is the description of my website.